I'll make sure I'm recording. Beautiful. How's life, brother?
Mate, life is fantastic, my friend. And what about yourself?
Yeah, keep it on, considering. It's trying to make the most of it rather than feel sorry for myself. Like,
yes.
Living in Cronulla, everyone no one loves healthy. There's worse things that could be happening.
Mate, there certainly is, my friend. There certainly is. Hey?
Now, how's it affected you? Are you still working, or what's the going?
I guess I've got a couple of things to keep me busy. But there's definitely bits and pieces that are slower. But mate, I guess I'm pretty happy. Yeah.
Mate, good. Well, that's it's I think it's a matter of what can you do rather than what you can't do.
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. I think if I'm super honest about it all, right, the big part of it comes down to the fact that really, mate, it's if you're not adaptable, you're gonna fuck yourself.
I agree.
Like, that's all there is to it, mate. There's just, and as much as I would like to say a whole bunch of other really simple things, mate, that's just the way it is, mate.
It's very true. We'll talk about it as we go on.
Yeah,
I've actually prepared for this one, which is rare for me.
Yeah, okay.
Because there's any number of podcasts I could do with you.
Yep.
I reckon we could go into a
Yep.
There's countless and different ways to attack it.
Yep.
And then like I'm still trying to work out where I want to take this podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was a real tough one when you said, do you want me to prepare a couple of questions? Because interestingly enough, I know we could just talk, right? Like, I know we could roll through 50 topics right now and probably create 7 podcasts if that was the case, right? Whereas, and I don't mean this, in a mean way to any other guest, but because of the areas of the game that I've been involved with and other sports I am currently involved with, you could take it any way you want it, So it's going to be exciting for me to do this. So I was super keen when you reached out. I was like, mate, this is I'm keen as for this one, that's for sure.
Well, let's start with this. And normally with the audio version, I'll give an intro to the guest on my own.
Yep.
But I've copped a bit of flack from my mother, of all people, for not doing it on the video version of the podcast.
Yep. Okay.
So I'm going to start by asking you a question that I hate people asking me because it's very hard for me to explain it. But who are you and what do you do for a living?
Okay. So Clint Hill, I'm a full-time professional strength and conditioning coach, and I also do a whole bunch of private PT and S&C mentoring. My current role within rugby union is with the West Harbour Pirates in the Shute Shield, obviously, here in Sydney. I'm the head of high performance and only strength and conditioning coach with the club. So that means that I have the men's program, the women's program, and the Colts program, which we're doing a lot of work to rebuild at the moment. So there's some, there's another topic that we'll get to as we move on that one. Then on top of that, I have about 9 professional athletes that I deal with in several different sports, from surfing to surf lifesaving in the Ironman series. I have two people going to the Olympics, as one in the rowing and one in canoe slalom. So there's a couple of different ones there. And then on top of that, some individuals that are, based out of different sports, whether it be rugby league, rugby union, or up and comers in sports like tennis.
So there's a lot to dig into straight away there. Yep. The thing, I guess, the biggest thing I want to know is the West Harbour job.
Yep.
That's fundamentally a full-time job. No matter how many ways you swing it, and you're doing all this other stuff on top.
Yeah. Yep.
how do you manage your time? How do you manage your life?
Okay, so all right, so
during a normal period of time.
Okay, yeah, let's do previous and during. So previous to lockdown, my day is a kickoff at around 5 a.m. I'm up, do my little morning routine, which involves walking the dog, bit of journaling, bit of meditation, you know, the fun pieces of life which keep me in check. And then, you know, as far as management of my own time, I'm pretty solid on making sure that I keep everything the way it needs to be kept. So for me, that kind of means that if I stick to a pretty solid routine, I can get through most things most days. I have a daily to-do list. I have a whiteboard up to my left of my desk where I can take, you know, my big rocks, so my big priorities for the day. And I just make sure that I follow a pretty strict structure around my time, whether it be with individual clients or whatever. I try not to answer emails outside of the times that I've allocated them. I try not to take phone calls outside of the time that I've allocated for them. Although you do know at certain periods in time, you've got to be, you've got to flow. You've got to take some of those things with a grain of salt and sort of move through them. But mate, you know, my typical day is 5 till about 9:30.
Okay, so it's big days, six days a week.
Yeah, generally 6 days. Like Saturday, obviously, you know, footy day in season. I'm at the field by 8 to 8:30 and leave by about 6:30. I'm the last one out of the change rooms typically. So that's, you know, that's fairly typical for the way I do things. You know, you've seen me in a change room. You know what the scenario is. I like to be very organised, and I've always got things there that aren't even necessary, but somebody might need one day. So yeah,
I'm going to jump around a little bit. I wanted to ask you. So I organise all this structure, and it just never works for me. But I got to ask you about your podcast. I listened to it today.
Yep.
As someone who's only just started my own podcast as well, I found it amazing that you are just speaking to yourself. How do you find that? Because I find it very strange. I've tried to do a couple on my own where I just talk, and I just feel like a moron.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I guess that's a hard one. First and foremost, I guess I've done a lot of that, Chubby. That's probably the other part of this, right? For example, and I guess this is something that I've practiced a lot over the years. I've done a lot of lecturing, whether it be university, whether it be for the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association, or privately as a mentor. So, you know, currently once a week I have a mentoring group of about 120 guys that guys and girls, 120 in the crew, that I literally speak at for 50 minutes and then open the floor to questions. So I'm fairly well practiced in it, to be honest. I write myself a pretty skeletal style of protocol. So I'll write, you know, so I might write intro, 2 points, middle of podcast, 2 points, end of podcast, make sure you don't forget these, summarize that, repeat this.
So it's a combination of having practiced for years and a bit of preparation.
Yeah, I think so, mate. I think so. I've always been pretty good at talking, which anyone
who... It's the occupation.
Yeah, it is an occupation, that's for sure. So I guess, mate, truthfully, it's a funny one because for me, and anyone who knows me will be laughing at this point, but you know, I could talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles without any drama.
Where do you want to take it?
Where do I want to take my podcast, mate? That's an unreal question, and thanks for asking. And yes, that is me buying a time to make sure I answer that question effectively for anyone out there who understands any form of media. But
the only reason I asked, mate, just to give you a little bit more time, is because I had a call from a gentleman. I won't say his name. Used to play rugby for Australia earlier in the week, And he's like, where do you want to take this? Where do you, what's your plans for this? Where do you see it going? And
Yep.
I think he was a bit disappointed that I didn't really have a plan.
Well, I do have a plan. So I guess there's two pieces. One, the biggest part of what I want to do is I want to engage truth. And one of my key pet hates, especially in the health and fitness industry and the professional sport industry, is some of the smoke and mirror and some of the bullshit, jobs for the boys or girls, jobs for your mates and these kind of things. But also from the social media perspective is people getting huge social media followings with low qualifications, terrible experience, but big marketing budgets. So I want to put that education piece out there with the opportunity for so many to take that for free. That's that side. The other part, and probably, I guess an important section for me, is about knowing and treating people with, I guess, respect and dignity. And what that means to me is that I want my podcast to be something that reflects the things that are important to me, not just education, understanding, and I guess, a place to ask questions without fear of judgment, but also to show people the path that I've been down, the things you need to know, the things you can know, and a different way to get it out there.
Beautiful, mate. Can I ask a request?
Yeah.
At some stage, can you do one on habits and how to change habits?
Absolutely.
I've been doing a lot of listening and reading on that, and I would love to hear you do one on that.
Mate, have you read James Clear's Atomic Habits?
I've just read it.
Mate, habits, all of those kind of creative pieces. And mate, look, I can easily bump that up the food chain for you because so I've written, and Chubby, this will give you an understanding, right? So I've got a current list of 139 podcasts that I'm going to do. Beautiful. So Greg Young, who's the owner of Body Science, and I sat down and he asked me a series of questions. And one of those questions was, how well organized are you around this? And I said to him, I've written down 45 podcasts that I want to do. And he said, write 100. Okay. And I went, shit. And I was like, okay, all right. So I did, and I started writing, and now every time something comes up, I go, oh, people want to hear about that, bang, I'll pull that in, right? So yes, I've got structure around my podcast, but I've also got the availability because it's mine. I can do what I wish, similar to yourself. If an opportunity comes up or something happens, you can bring that forward or push that back or whatever it happens to be. So yeah.
I've got to pull my finger out. 100 podcasts.
Yes.
The biggest thing, I guess the biggest thing I wanted to talk to you about, mate, and I thought a really good way of taking this, because I've done a few coaching podcasts already.
Yep.
And there's a lot of young coaches out there going through the system, and it's my first year. I'm very lucky to have a good mentor in Todd, but learning how all the different pieces of coaching fit together is something that I think just takes time.
Yes.
And something that I have not seen anywhere is how the head of performance and a head coach work together, align, and how to get that role really. So I guess that's my first question, and then finish whatever you're saying is, when you walk into a program, what's the first thing you do?
Okay, so I guess the first piece of the puzzle is, and this is semi-pro footy, right? Like, so this is where, the level we're at, where our players get paid in first grade and those kind of things to play or to win or whatever the case may be. The coaching staff, some are getting paid, some are still volunteer, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I guess the first piece of the puzzle is respect. And why I start there is, obviously, I've been in the game now for a long period of time, from player to coach, and obviously, moved up the system and gone into head of high performance in a couple of clubs now. But one of the key pieces to that is understanding that at your club and at my club, roles are totally different. Okay, structure is totally different. The head coach, the GM, the operations manager, who knows what, right? Everyone's role is different. Okay, so it's about respecting what one person currently does and what another person currently does to really get that system correct. Now, once that piece of the puzzle is there, I try and set aside the things that I've seen that work, whether it comes from, watching, an operator like Johnny Manenti, who's a real people person and not such a heavy stickler for the data and so on and so forth. He's just great with the people and just a real coach's coach. That's your phone call, that. Whereas, someone like Todd is certainly someone who, requires a lot of background paperwork and wants to see the structure and wants to see the systems and wants to understand why you think this and why you think that. Mark Gudmanson, that I'm working with now, is a really amazing coach at understanding this is your role, Clint. You're better at it than I am. Off you go. Tell me what you need. Tell me how we're going to work together. Tell me how this is going to happen. And mate, look, I've kind of worked with all manner of coaches. Like I had Brad Moore, who's now the attack coach for the All Blacks at Southland, and a whole bunch of different people like that I've worked with over the years. Every coach, every head coach, and every GM is very different. So it really is about understanding that structure, respecting those lines, but also setting your non-negotiables. And for me, and coming back to West Harbour after many years, I think it was 12 seasons that I'd been away since I came back, I walk in with, my normal bit of flair and a bit of, a bit of humour and whatnot, but also a very serious line of non-negotiables. Even now during COVID, the boys have got to post every single day into our WhatsApp group what they're doing, because obviously they're only allowed to train by themselves or with a member of their household. So, I had to individually write programs that suit, we shelled out all the equipment from the gym. The boys have either got a pair of dumbbells and a weight plate and a resistance band, and that's about it in most cases. Except the guys who might live in a 4 or 5 bedroom house where there's a couple of them. So for me, that's been a big thing. But, Gutto's let me really run that show and make sure I've got full control over the athletes right through down to the Colts and the women's program, making sure that each one of them have got everything they need. But for me, that's definitely about understanding each person's role in that, who I need to speak to about what, how I need to get things done quickly, effectively, and efficiently, so that I don't waste anyone's time, especially volunteers that are really putting their time and effort into the game. A lot of times being unseen and unheard.
A couple of questions for me. So obviously, once you've worked out all that sort of stuff, when it comes to the actual physical preparation of a sporting team, rugby team, individual, whatever way you want to look at it, do you look at the game first, or the game model that the coach wants to coach, and then work your training program around that, or how do you attack it?
So I have a sort of in my head a bit of a pillar system, and I've written this down previously in a lecture that I did for a presentation I did for the ASCA, which is the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association. And what I said is there's three things, right? Firstly, there's the type of game that wants to be played. Secondly, there are the non-negotiables around what is required for that person to be a better athlete, better human, better ability, low injury, more resilient. And then thirdly, there's the specific parts that individual is lacking. Right. So that comes into the assessment side, that comes into the understanding what each person requires. That second piece, around understanding the game, that you're going to at some point get tackled by a 70 kilo halfback. You also know that at some point you're going to get tackled by a 150 kilo prop, right? So we know those things. And then thirdly, we know that a particular coach might want to be the fittest team, not particularly worry about the size, not particularly worried about set piece, not particularly worried, or the opposite way around. You know, they might be, you know, a big stickler for that effect around, you know, making sure that the strongest team on the park, you know. So for me, that comes down to those three pieces and really working out which percentage, because we've only got 100% of training, right? So depending on which athlete you're looking at, if I'm looking at an 18-year-old who's, you know, on the verge of being signed for the Tars, I'd prefer to worry about the individual pieces that are going to keep them resilient. And when I hand that athlete over to the Tars or to the Queensland, or actually probably never to the Tars in this case, you know, it's usually, unfortunately, to our other states. Maybe that'll change with DC jumping on and taking the cake. But interestingly enough, we've just got Cody Hawkins and his partner wandering past.
Dangerous.
Yeah, so I've just got the wave from one of my wonderful athletes. So Cody, I know you'll listen to this podcast. He's waving away there now. So yeah, there you go.
Okay, so something I've really enjoyed, and it's my first year coaching, so I've got no idea what I'm doing. I'm learning a lot. But one of the great things about Shute Shield is that you've got a mix of people who are aspirational, and you've got a mix of guys who are a bit older and a bit younger who are just sort of social players, and it's an outlet. It's an outlet from life.
Yes.
As a coach, so that as a coach, that kind of puts you in a weird position because you're not really. You've got these guys who are basically professionals in terms of their, you know, application, and you've got guys who aren't.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
Okay, so and for every one of your listeners, the guys watching this on video or whatever the case may be, Chubby, I think there's two really key pieces to this, mate. First and foremost, anyone that ever gets paid to play this game should be looked upon as loving every minute of that process, right? They should be grateful that they ever get the opportunity, because there's some guy toiling away in third grade that is never, ever going to play a game of first grade ever. And if I could make every first grader remember that, honestly, I'd pack it up, right? That'd do me, right? Because some days I look at the way some first graders behave, and I think to myself, mate, you don't realise that there's the second grade fly half sitting there would chew his own arm off for a 5-second cameo in first grade. But the reason that I'm starting with that statement's really simple, mate, because you've also got to remember that a club is made up of those amazing third and fourth grade individuals, whereas Southern Districts, you know, in a pair of budgie smugglers on the DJ deck over on the hill, you know, swearing at me because I'm trying to shout instructions at a winger or whatever the case may be, right down to that, you know, fourth grade, fifth grade prop that, you know, it probably should have given up the game 10 years ago, but we'll still do a job for you if asked, you know. You know, the beauty of what we get the opportunity to do is remember that the bell curve must exist. So if I first and foremost look at the program, okay, 83% of people will fit in that middle ground where they want to train, they want to do weights, they really, you know, they will turn up, they will put in, but some days they're going to cut a couple of reps short because they're feeling shit. They've been on the tools all day at work and they will cut it short. You know that that's the case. So you get the most out of them on the days that work. Then you've got your top echelon of guys who are, you know, should be playing Super Rugby, that are on their way there. Hopefully they see that the more weights they do, the more mobility, the more they help that next group, brings a couple more into that group. And then you've got that final wonderful group that I love in that social aspect, that I seem to get along with those guys really well. But I also tell them, I want you to still work. Like, the game is better when you're a bit fitter, a bit stronger. You're less chance of getting injured. If I can educate them on why I need them to be that way, usually they will put in. You know, perfect example there is, you know, Tom Games and Vaughnie Lomax. You know, ex-first graders for West Harbour, tremendous men, both playing third grade at the moment. You know, their work means that they probably only train, you know, 1 and a little bit of a night of a week rather than the traditional 3. But they always make sure they get a little bit of weights done at home, whether it's a bodyweight circuit, whether it's a stretch, whatever it happens to be. And they'll take the piss out of me for it, mate. They will, okay? But that's when you know you've got them. When they're taking the piss out of you and you're having that banter with those boys, mate, that's when you know that you're on the right track.
Okay. A couple of things. I've seen it just as many times as you've seen it. There's a young guy who's, you know, sort of 20, 25, who's a talented player, but probably doesn't have the patience and the work ethic to really achieve their potential.
Yep.
What's your approach with guys like that?
Mate, okay, so first things first, I try 3 things. First one that I try is I try and show them someone who was them. Try and show them an example, right? I try and say, you know, there's this, like, so I'll give them an example of someone who's changed their tune and they're therefore made Super Rugby or whatever it happens to be, right? Or you know, a regular first grader, whatever the case may be. But first, that's the first port of call, trying to show an example. Because if they can physically see that, physically hear it coming from that player rather than a coach who they know is there to do a job, okay, it means that you've got that little bit. It's like drawing on a testimonial. You know what I mean? Like when you go to buy a car and the salesman says, oh, you know, this RAV4's an amazing vehicle, blah blah blah. You know, so that's the first one. The second one is I try and meet them at their level. Okay. Now, if that's look, perfect example here, mate. You know, a loafer has just rejoined. A loafer's just rejoined West Harbour. I had a loafer as an athlete, you know, over 12 years ago before he joined the Waratahs and then headed over to France. So a loafer and I have a good relationship. In his early days, he didn't love doing weights. He didn't love, you know, that was, he was super fast. He was electric. Mate, we sit down and went to dinner. You know, I took the bloke out for a meal. You know, the good old break bread with a human is a tremendous one for me. You know, like I'm a big advocate for you know, showing boys you care. Okay, because mate, they certainly care about me. You know, recently I just did a 24-hour walk for mental health, which I know you saw on my social media. So mate, I'd been back at West Harbour, might I add, for less than 2 months. I had 13 of my boys at the finish line. I had 3 of them walk more than 25 Ks with me. And I had 1 of them prepared to walk the whole damn thing. Right? That's awesome. Now, mate, I've been there for 6 or 7 weeks, right? Like, now, I knew none of those boys at that stage. When one of them actually turned up, I had to rack my brain to remember his name because I'd only been there 6 weeks. I hadn't learned everyone's inside and out yet. But, mate, that's, you know, mate, that in itself, you know, that pulls on the old heartstrings for me, you know, like that's pretty, you know, that shows that you're making a difference in blokes' lives. And the third piece and you know, where this question originated, and again, apologies that I do go off on a little tangent, to add story, to add testimonial, to add that, you know, that genuine feeling. But the third piece is I try and find out why they don't see things the same way I do. Okay, you know, mate, you can look. You know, I've had any number of international players that I've worked with over the years. You know, the Al Atoll boys. You know, Michael and Alan, obviously both you know, tremendous in their own right. One for Australia, one now for Samoa, and mate, you know, as kids, they were gigantic humans, okay? But, you know, I gained their trust, and, you know, Alan only talked about that the other day. He was at a West Harbour function, and, you know, made comment about, you know, me screaming at them when they were, you know, Colts, you know, doing 4 and 5s on the backfield at St. Luke's. And, you know, that stuff resonates, mate. It kicks back over, and they know I care. So therefore it's a lot easier to get that buy-in when that's the case, mate.
I've talked about this on other podcasts, but I'd love to get the opinion of a head of performance. Is Steve Hansen was quoted in an article not that long ago saying he doesn't understand why coaches don't want to get close to players.
Right.
He's saying that if you get close to players, you'll be able to teach them in their language, you'll be able to get more out of them.
Yep.
But if it starts to affect your judgment, you're not putting the team first. Now, I really like that point of view, and that's kind of something I've adapted early on. Is it different for a head of performance S&C type role?
Look, no, it's not. You do have to be really careful with favourites. Okay, you know, Cody Hawkins a perfect example. You know, just walked past a few minutes ago, or, you know, back in the Eastwood days for me. You know, Hugh Perrott, Benny Batcher, blokes that, you know, Jai Ayub, the little general. You know, these blokes are guys that, you know, I am absolute mates with as well. You know, guys like Jai. You know, I mean, God, I had him at rugby league, you know, 18 years ago or some crap. You know, like I think I coached Jai 2 different sports, 6 different teams, or something crazy like that. You know, but the point I'm trying to make in that, mate, is quite simple in saying that. You get close to blokes, you have to understand that you're not going to be close with everyone. You've still got to treat everyone with massive amounts of respect, you know. And mate, I'll let you in on a very simple little secret, and I don't mind my players knowing this either as I say this, but mate, you know, I try to learn little things about each one of them, and you know, the players know that I'll go and give their partners a kiss or say g'day, or try and know something about their external life. You know, got a young prop currently playing 2nd grade. No doubt you would have seen the young fella, Tungi Murphy, tremendous human, 155 kilo prop, moves like the wind. You know, he's already made the Pig Athletic a couple of times with one hell of a step. You know, his mum and dad turned up to a game at Concord. Pardon me, not at Concord. I wish we were at Concord, but unfortunately we're at Drummoyne Oval at the moment, with Concord still being renovated. But mate, I went over and introduced myself to them, and afterwards, Tungi was like, "Oh, thanks for introducing yourself to mum and dad." Now, that's because I have a high level of respect for the players. I'm not saying that doesn't mean that, you know, another coach doesn't. But for me, if I'm going to ask him to put his body on the line for me every week and do things, you know, in the gym that he's never done before, mate, just simply show respect. Show that player you give a shit, right?
Yeah.
So, mate, I'm certainly all about that. You know, I was on the phone to Stevie Cummins earlier today. You know, Max Page, a halfback that we had at West Harbour and Eastwood, was you know, came over the other day for a training session. So, mate, you know, look, I'm a big believer in forming great relationships with your players, but, you know, that also comes down to, you know, showing them the respect they deserve.
How do you balance the need for, so in sport, even semi-professional sport, you're still expected to get results. But the funny thing about that I've seen about coaching is that development actually takes some time.
Yeah. Yep.
So how do you balance the need between long-term development and short-term result,
well,
particularly in the athletic department, because getting fast takes time?
Yeah. Look, there's a really interesting one, and you know, your former head of high performance there at Southern District, Clint Hill, and I are very good mates, and Hori and I talk about this a lot. That time that it takes to develop that long-term athletic development model within a club, you have to get the buy-in of your board. You have to have them understand that. You have to have your coach get that. And if you can't explain that in terms that makes players and coaches understand that, well, mate, you're in all kinds of trouble. Back in my rugby league days when I was working for West Tigers, young Aaron Woods was an up-and-coming prop playing for Holy Cross Ride at that time. And we went away on a trip up to far north Queensland, where myself and Todd Payton, who was playing for the West Tigers at the time, but he was the head coach of what was called the West Tigers Cubs group. And so we went away, and I was chatting away to Woodsy on one of the flights, and he said to me that he'd played 16 games of footy between Balmain Juniors, Holy Cross Ride, CAS and CHS within 29 days. And we were just about to take him away and ask him to play 3 games in 6 days. Now, interestingly enough, a big light went off in my head. I'm like, hang on a sec, mate, not just how many minutes is that, how many impacts is that for a front rower? Now, rugby league, obviously, nice simple game. We know we got six hit-ups, and if you're playing prop, you're probably going to have one of those, okay? And you're an exceptional prop at that stage. He was an Aussie schoolboy, so he was the man. And, mate, I remember thinking to myself, I went back to my room and I started scribbling away all these numbers and starting to do the bit of data analysis, and I just went, Jesus Christ, this kid's getting flogged, right? So I went back to the coaches and I said, hey, look, I've just gone through this with Woodsy, and this is the scenario. Can you tell me what you think? No, and Toddy Payton, who was a front rower for West Tigers and is now coaching, he sort of said, mate, I couldn't do that. And as soon as the penny dropped for me, mate, I realised that you have to understand longevity in this game means, and in any game, might I add, in sport, means smarter rather than harder, okay? Understanding what you need to achieve, understanding bare minimums, and also then controlling blokes who want to give more, who want to be over the top. I often say the words that you can't overtrain, you can only under recover.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece of that puzzle for me, Chubby.
That's going to help. That's going to help a lot of people, because I think the sort of the meshing of the technical, tactical, and the physical is still something that people aren't quite across at the developing coach level. And
mate, you've got to be really truthful here, mate. I have made more mistakes than you've had hot breakfasts, okay, or hot dinners for that case, because, mate, the part and the beauty of this is I had some amazing mentors who allowed me to make those mistakes, right? Might have been given blokes weights that were too heavy at certain points in the season, or not enough recovery, or not the mental stuff they needed. Not giving them a cuddle when they needed a cuddle, or a pat on the bum when they needed that. But mate, I think the truth of this is, mate, stop trying to think that anyone out there is better than you or perfect, because, mate, I promise you, mate, the list of mistakes that I've made over the years, would make, if I went back and revisited them, some of them would make my hair stand on end, because it's such a, we're no different to a player, mate. They drop the footy on the weekend and cause a knock on, and you get a try scored off it. Well, mate, next job, okay? Same as us. If I've given you, a back squat and, you've ended up sore and therefore unable to play, or, you've injured a hamstring because, our volume was too high during the week, mate, we've all done it. Okay. And any coach that thinks they're better than that probably needs to revisit their humility and realise that that's really not true.
Beautiful. You've answered one of my questions. I was going to ask about failure and learning from mistakes. Yep. but just probably another way that I would frame that is all the stuff that you've learned. Do you have a way that do you write it down? Do you log it? How do you recall this sort of stuff?
Mate, look, I'd love to say that I'm an absolute genius, Chubby, and that it all comes naturally to me and I just roll it off the top of my head. But, mate, no. I ask every season, I ask for 3 players and 3 coaches to review me. That's on a personal level. This has got nothing to do with the club. The club obviously does reviews on you each and every season, the coaching staff, etc. But I always ask for that individual feedback, and I ask people that are going to be ruthless. Okay, I'm ruthless in my pursuit of excellence. So therefore, I ask players the same thing. I'd ask a Jed Gillespie for an honest feedback.
He's going to be honest.
Mate, Jed's going to be honest. Let's face it, right? I'd ask a Jai Ayub that wouldn't hold back and would say, "Hey, mate, I hated this fucking drill. This drill was great, etc., etc." Whatever. Okay, but you never just ask the 3 fittest. Okay, you never ask the 3 strongest. You pick blokes across the park, right? And I think, mate, I was walking down the street here in Maroubra, where I live, a couple of weeks back when you were still allowed outside. There's a young bloke who was, 2 blokes actually, Stephen James and Nick Potter, who are blokes that I coached in 3rd and 4th grade at West Harbour 12 seasons ago. And the pair of them, still a little bit of banter, still a little bit, but guts honest. Okay, they came and watched the game a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Mate, it's great to see that West Harbour are fit, strong. They look the best we've seen them look in years. Well done." Now, mate, even that stuff is just tremendous feedback. But if you're not doing feedback and analysis on yourself, and these are the 3 questions I ask myself: did I make players better this week? Did I make myself better? And what mistakes did I make that I can learn from? Because
you do that every week? Every week?
Every week, mate. Every week. Maybe not totally formally in the sense of I don't sit down and write down the answers, but quite regularly, especially on a Saturday arvo after driving home. I've just polished off, 2 schooners, courtesy of Akasha Breweries at Concord, one of our good sponsors. But I'd sit in the car on the drive home and go, rightio, how was this week really? Am I pissed off about this? Did we do well here? How did that pan out? Did I forget anything? Was there anything I could have done better? Okay. Constant self-analysis, mate.
Mate, I feel like I could talk to you all fucking day, but have you got time for just a few rapid questions?
Go for it, mate.
And then I'll let you get back to whatever you're doing.
Thank you.
Why do you coach?
Mate, when you wrote that question, I was like, fuck, I'm so happy to answer that. I coach because I want to be the coach that I didn't have, or did have in some cases, but didn't have when I was my age. So when I was that up-and-coming athlete, when I wanted to be, I was playing Aussie schoolboys, water polo at that stage, playing Central North Rugby, New South Wales, and I wanted to be a professional athlete more than anyone on the planet, and because I grew up in the country, I didn't really have some of those things available to me. And by the time I got to Sydney, it was a bit late in a lot of cases. So, yeah.
What have you changed your mind on that you used to be certain about?
Mate, my mind is an absolute open book these days. So the first thing, and I explain it like this quite regularly, 25-year-old Clint would bash 20-year-old Clint for being such an up himself little wanker, okay? And vice versa, each 5 years, incrementally going up, But the point that I'm trying to make there is that humility is very difficult, and being high ego and coming from that athletic background, your ego is quite high. You go into it really set in your ways, and you think that you're perfect, and you look at someone else and go, what a load of shit, or whatever it happens to be. Mate, keeping your mind open is something that you probably learn far too late in life. They often say that experience is wasted on the elderly. And that's something that I totally agree. So I wish I'd listened more. The equation that David Boyle, one of my best mentors, always hits me with is, mate, 2 ears, 1 mouth.
I love it, mate. Love it.
So, yeah.
How important is personal development? And what do you do for personal development?
Mate, amazing. When I signed my contract with West Harbour, I had a PD clause included in my contract, which meant there was a series of, like, there was money put aside for that, but there was also time put aside for that. And what that means is that it gives me an opportunity to, I flew up to the Gold Coast, spent some time with the Reds, spent some time with the Titans, and spent some time with the Australian water polo team, because I'm a heavy believer in that sport crossover, because the lessons are quite regularly the same, but the ways you get things across are always going to be slightly different. The education of each individual is always going to be different. If you're not reading, okay, you're wasting one of the most valuable resources you can. I put books up on my Instagram all the time that I'm currently reading. I'm currently reading Mark Burris's Rise, about his story, because what you can learn from the financial world, you can take over to sport. What you learn from sport, you can take over the financial world. It doesn't matter what it happens to be. But PD is probably one of the things that I would turn around to every young S&C. I don't care if you're not getting paid for your first couple of years of role, but ask for, a trip to the Brumbies, a trip to whatever. Just get them to pay for something or help you get something in that realm. Because, mate, I learned more on my first my first ASCA strength and conditioning conference than I think I'd learned in the previous 7 years at uni.
You kind of answered the question already, but what books would you recommend for young coaches? And it doesn't just have to be head of performance, S&C, just coaching in general.
Yeah, okay. So 11 Rings, Phil Jackson.
I love it. Love that book.
Great book. Relentless by Timmy Grover, who was Jordan, Kobe Bryant, their athletic trainer. Then I would also probably look at, I guess, from sort of the other side. There's a book called Change, and it's about mindset and so on and so forth. There's another book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Mate, look, I'm a big believer in crossing out of your lane to read new things and then dragging that back into your lane, but remembering to stay in your lane when you don't know something. So they're probably my key books. And from a personal growth rather than outside of sport, there's a book by Viktor Frankl. He was a psychologist that was in Auschwitz. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning. It's one of the books that I give to just about anyone who I mentor.
I heard about that today. That's next on my list.
It'll blow your mind. If you're not crying by page 3, you don't have a heart.
We were just talking about this before. I'd recommend to anyone Atomic Habits as well.
Oh, great book.
And I've just started reading The Barcelona Way by Damien Hughes.
Yep.
Couldn't recommend it to anyone more.
Yep.
Any podcast you'd recommend, mate?
Yeah, mate. Look, I guess I'm very biased. I like the short, sharp versions. And I don't just necessarily stay in the lane of I guess, sport. But the All Blacks podcast is always great. I love hearing about the Kiwi ways. I was blessed to have the opportunity to go and work for Southland in the ITM Cup back in the day, and had some tremendous All Blacks play for us in that particular team, and I learned so much from that particular group. But from an S&C perspective, Westside Barbell. Definitely right up there with some of the best stuff I've ever heard. I'm still a Joe Rogan fan and whatnot, but they're probably a little bit too long for me these days. I like the 20 to 40 minute realm. But realistically, What the Ruck is another good one. So yeah, look, I'm pretty open to a lot of different areas.
Nice, mate. Last question, and it's how I finish every episode.
Yep. What
advice would you give 18-year-old Clint Hill?
Shut up.
That's great advice, mate. That's a good way to end.
Yeah, mate. I think that was great.
I really appreciate your time, mate. I think there's, personally for me, so many things I can take away, and I think anyone who listens to this will get something out of it. So the Hill Strength and Performance podcast.
Yep.
So I recommend anyone check that out. I'll put it in the description in the bio. What's your Instagram handle?
Clint_Hill Strength.
Check it out. You're always putting some good stuff up there. And mate, I hope we get out of this lockdown and get to have a beer in person soon.
We're only 2 weeks away from playing each other. So that's, I love coming down to Southern Districts, as you know, so many of the boys I've had, I've had the fortune to coach over the years, and, so many of your management I've worked with, and it's just mate, it's one of my favourite places. And I was disappointed that I didn't end up getting the opportunity to work down there a couple of seasons ago.
Oh, mate, you'd fit in terribly well, which I don't know if that's a compliment to you, actually.
Probably not. I'm sure when you think of blokes like Paulie Asquith and Holloway, please, let's not. Let's leave it there.
All right, mate. I'm grateful for your time, my friend. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Chubby. Speak soon, mate. Take care.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, bud.